Hello, and welcome to this week's Ask an Atheist. My name is Liz Cavell. I'm Associate Counsel for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I am joined in our studio today by FFRF Legal Fellow Sammi Lawrence. Hi, Sammi.
Hi.
It is that time of year again. It is back to school season. So we're going to spend this week's episode discussing religion in our public schools, student rights, violations of the Establishment Clause in schools, and what you can do about it. And as always, if you have questions today about our topic, you can drop them in the comments below, or you can send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org. So, fall is upon us, and that also means high school football season is starting. We have discussed many times on the show the Bremerton School District versus Kennedy case involving a coach who led his students in prayer in Bremerton, Washington. That case was decided last summer. Well, this football season kicked off on September 1st, and it was actually Kennedy's first time back on the field at Bremerton High School. If you recall, he was fighting to get reinstated to his job for 8 years, and so he's finally back in Bremerton High School. FFRF marked the occasion by putting up our billboard near the high school, reminding students that they still have rights and they're entitled to a secular public school experience. We also ran my op-ed in the Seattle Times ran my op-ed yesterday, talking about what the coach did and the reality of the case. And just a quick refresher, even though we've talked about it plenty. What happened in the Kennedy case is that the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 majority that Kennedy's prayers on the 50-yard line were protected by the First Amendment. But if you recall, the court's opinion rested on a false version of the facts. So the court zeroed in on a couple of instances of the coach's prayers, took them out of context, and kind of characterized what Coach Kennedy was asking the district to do as just give private, personal, short prayers during downtime that didn't interfere with his official duties as coach. So even though the case did a lot of damage to the case law on the Establishment Clause, it really only stood for the proposition that coaches can engage in private, personal prayer that doesn't interfere with their official duties, but still that what he was doing, the performative, coercive prayers with students, remains unconstitutional. Well, fast forward to last Friday, Coach Kennedy is back in Bremerton taking his victory lap. Here's a bit of news coverage, NBC News, on his return and FFRF's reaction.
Joe Kennedy back to being an assistant coach after being fired in 2015 for refusing to stop praying with players on the field.
We have fought the good fight, and we finished this race, and we kept the faith the whole entire time, and it was absolutely 100% worth it.
Alan Pahimula coached volleyball at Bremerton High when Kennedy was let go 8 years ago, which led to a long legal fight that made its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where in a 6-3 majority vote, the court ruled his prayers were protected by the First Amendment and was reinstated in March.
I think there's people out there that still think, why are we still giving him the publicity? But ultimately, he's doing what he believes is right. He's out here to be here for the kids. That's what it's all about.
While there are supporters in the stands for Coach Kennedy, there are those protesting his return. Less than a mile from the stadium, the Freedom from Religion Foundation put up this billboard wishing students a safe and secular school year.
So not yet clear is whether the coach actually intends to stay in Bremerton. So you may also recall us discussing that during the pendency of the litigation, he moved out of the state, even though the whole case kind of hinged on him fighting for his job back. He and his wife actually live in Florida now. Our friend Hemant Mehta, the Friendly Atheist, kind of noted this in a recent column. And Kennedy talked to the AP about whether or not he even intends to stay, because of course he no longer lives in Bremerton. He's house sitting for a friend while he does his big public return to Bremerton. But of course, like the gentleman in the video said, it's all about the kids. But I don't think Coach Kennedy's priorities have anything to do with the Bremerton High School football team players. So we all know that the Kennedy decision has sown a lot of confusion, and it is leading to increased violations by coaches and other public school officials. So we're going to talk today about the fallout from that. Sammi, the school year is getting ramped up. What types of violations are we seeing this year?
Well, the school-related complaints are already rolling in, and they have been for quite a few weeks now. We're receiving a lot of complaints about prayers that coaches are leading as football programs begin to start up again around the country. And we have received a lot of complaints about prayers at teacher in-service training. Most school districts, as people probably know, they hold a large mandatory in-service training before the new school year, and unfortunately a lot of school districts include Christian invocations and prayers as part of those convocations. And like you said, Liz, the real thing is that the Kennedy decision didn't actually change that much. Public school employees have always been able to privately pray on their own time when they feel like it, if it's not interfering with their work. But unfortunately, a lot of school districts and employees are taking the Kennedy case many steps further than it is actually meant to go. We actually, just today, I was assigned a complaint where a football coach in Kentucky has reportedly gathered recently, at their first practice, gathered all of the football players around, asked them all if they went to church, told them that they should go to church if they don't, and then led them all in prayer as part of a public school football practice.
Cool. Well, here's the thing. We've been receiving complaints like this for as long as FFRF has been taking complaints from the public, but the risk now is what the court did do with the Kennedy case is what it's been trying to do and aiming at for a long time since the Roberts Court has gained its supermajority of really ultra-conservative Christian sort of supremacy majority, and that is to weaken the Establishment Clause by weakening the analysis that the court does of Establishment Clause claims. It used the Kennedy case to do that, to sort of eviscerate the Lemon test, which really just means the really robust way that courts used to analyze the Establishment Clause has been really undermined by the Kennedy case. But of course, like Sammi is pointing out, that didn't change the fact that what Coach Kennedy was doing was coercive under any test. And so are many of these violations that are being reported to us again this school year, including a coach who has full and complete power and control and authority over his players, telling them that they, just like they ought to do things that will be taken as orders by their players, like show up for practice or lift weights or, do conditioning, they're gonna be viewing directions to go to church and to join the team in prayer as orders, which is coercive and against the Establishment Clause. Because of course, this is a public school coach who is a government employee, not the place for religious coercion, especially towards kids. So I also want to talk about some of the other types of violations that we see in public schools, especially around this time of year. Prayer in the classroom, prayer in public school sporting or athletics programs, prayer at employee convocations you talk about, which is mandatory employment training, that the program itself includes prayer. I think I was reviewing one of your recent letters that had like 4 clergy members present at an in-service training being introduced. It was almost like a little recruiting bump, and then one of them leading the entire district staff in prayer. Of course, this is prayer, sectarian prayer, but one clergy member's particular brand of Christianity being imposed on an entire workforce, a government workforce. it's coercive. They have to be there, literally. So that's a big problem. We've heard about it before, and we're hearing about it again this year. Another phenomenon that's really odd that I think a lot of people don't necessarily hear about, but it's actually can be pretty widespread in some of the districts that are problematic with religion in public schools, is at the beginning of the school year, is prayer walks. So we did a little brochure last year, a short kind of educational resource to give some information about prayer walks and public schools. So what is a prayer walk? Why or how do prayer walks violate the law? They coincide with the beginning of the school year because they involve exactly what they sound like, which is walking around public school campuses, or oftentimes on and in public school campuses, and praying over the space, the public school plant. Sammi, tell me about complaints that you hear and how these violate the Establishment Clause, how they involve public school districts in a way that violates the separation of church and state.
Well, besides prayer walks, which is another issue that we've received a lot of complaints about this year, is prayer walks mostly in more rural school districts, but even large school districts. Another kind of complaint that we get a lot is parents especially being concerned that their school districts are partnering with and encouraging students to attend something called released time Bible study classes. These are not super common everywhere in the country, but unfortunately, released time religious education is something that's been really growing. One group in particular, LifeWise Academy, has been spreading, especially in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and basically what these are religious classes that public school students are encouraged to attend once a week, but during the school day. So they have to leave their public school, go to a church or whatever, take this class for an hour, and then go back to their school. So they're missing at least an hour of school every day. And a lot of these programs are meant to take years. So over 3, 4, 5 years, students are missing a really substantial amount of their public education.
Right. So release time programs are sadly legal in terms of the Establishment Clause. The Supreme Court has said that students can be released for periods of time during the public school day to attend religious training. But of course, the line there is they are not, release time is not and cannot be public school programming itself, meaning the public school district cannot in any way be organizing, facilitating, encouraging student participation in release time. And so that is where release time ministries and public school districts are constantly violating the law while they think that they're doing the legal thing, which is engaging in release time religious education. We get complaints about this all the time because public school districts are overstepping the boundary and encouraging students themselves to attend release time. The public school district's only role in release time programming is that they have to allow their students to be released during the school day to attend release time at, parent request. They shouldn't be taking any more active of a role than that. And that's where a lot of confusion comes in, and we do get a lot of complaints. We're seeing those this year as well. So I want to circle back to prayer walks just to say the types of things you might see that would violate the law in a prayer walk would be the same kind of thing, right? Like you're allowed to walk around and pray anywhere you want, I guess, if that includes you walking around an empty school campus, praying over a school plant. If you're on public property, I suppose that's your right. But again, a prayer walk is a wholly religious exercise. It is not the type of thing that can be organized, sponsored, or, in any way like facilitated, except in the same way that any other kind of public access to the campus would be. So in other words, we hear a lot about religious groups, churches, or these ministries that organize a prayer walk before the start of the school year getting special access to go inside of campus, right? Like schools are locked down. I might be able to walk onto a public school, elementary school property and play on the playground, but I can't, get let into the inside doors and walk around and look inside the classrooms, no matter when it is in the school year, right? But ministry getting access to the school by contacting the district and asking, can we come inside and walk through every single classroom and pray? That is something that is preferential access. It is the district involving itself. And then, of course, what's often happening is the district is out and out aligning itself with the prayer walk or organizing it, posting about it on official social media channels, promoting and advertising it to district parents and students, all of which is crossing the line. And so that's something that we write to school districts about. That's something that parents are really upset about when they see it in their school districts, because it obviously is aligning the district with a particular brand of religion and Christianity. So, in addition to writing letters to school districts when we hear about these complaints, we're trying to make sure that students, teachers, parents understand that even in the wake of the Kennedy decision that has really shaken up the way that courts are going to be analyzing Establishment Clause cases, it's really important to understand that our public schools are still secular and students are still entitled to a education that's free from religious coercion. So what does that mean? We have been developing resources for students. We have a Know Your Rights informational page on our website in different formats. You can check it out on our webpage. There's PDFs. There's a little kind of wallet card version, but the crux of it is we want people to understand that even though the Kennedy case said Coach Kennedy wins, you still have a right as a student to be free from coach-led, teacher-led prayer, right? So what does that mean? It's kind of like what Sammi described, right? Your coach can't gather the whole team and say, okay, we're going to pray now, or, do sermonizing, or asking everyone if they attend church and telling you really should. That's part of the team ethic. All of that is coercive. You know it because you feel it when you're not comfortable and that's not your religious feeling, but you still feel like you have to go along with it because the coach controls so much about your life if you're a player on a public high school team. So you are still entitled to a experience in public school athletics that is religion-free, and also, of course, in the classroom. You have teachers that think that they can pray with their students or encourage their students to pray or sermonize students or teach students about religious ideas. All of that is still over the line. It's unconstitutional. It violates the separation between church and state. So you have a right to be free from teacher prayer, coach prayer. You have a right to secular school events. That means that public school events that are clearly school-sponsored, like football games and high school graduations, or as disgustingly we've seen, 5th grade graduations or kindergarten graduations, 8th grade promotion ceremonies, awards banquets, assemblies, all of the above are public school-sponsored events, and they should be secular. They shouldn't be religious. They shouldn't include religious activities. They shouldn't open with a prayer. They shouldn't include recruiting to religious events or any of that. They should be secular, and that means that they should not have any religious pressure as a part of the public school event program. Important to note that you always have the right to be free from bullying and harassment. And schools are often very committed to this principle, but schools are very, or have quite a blind spot when it comes to religious bullying and harassment, and how their religious promotion and their religious coercion as school officials really plays into and increases the likelihood of bullying and harassment on the basis of religion, right? Like forcing kids to have to absent themselves from the prayer circle puts a target on their back and makes them feel ostracized and isolated, and just is a breeding ground for bullying and harassment in public schools, which are often already such high social pressure environments, and so rife with bullying and harassment to begin with. This is why religion is, as one of the most divisive things in our society, has no place in public schools, because it creates division, it creates isolation for minority students, non-religious students, and of course invites harassment. And again, you have the right to be free from religious coercion. That means not just direct coercion. Coercion is not just the teacher saying, pray right now or you're going to have detention. It's not just saying, I'm forcing you to do something, otherwise there's a consequence. It's not just, nailing you down to your chair and, prying your eyes open and forcing you to look at prayer or a religious activity. It's all the indirect ways that public school is coercive. It's the combination of social pressures and the power dynamic between students and teachers and students and coaches. All of those forces are extremely coercive on public school students, and that creates an environment that when you throw religion into the mix, especially when that's being advanced or promoted by the authority figure, the teacher, the coach, the administrator, it's incredibly coercive. And so you have a right not to face that type of coercion when you're participating in public school programs. All of this is under the umbrella of the right to freedom of conscience. So that means, you do have the right, if you are so inclined, to privately pray or, practice whatever your own religious or spiritual practice is in a way that's non-disruptive at school. But the flip side of that is you have a right to have a dissenting opinion. You have a right to speak your mind, push back against the majority viewpoint, the majority religious viewpoint. You have a full freedom of conscience. That means the right to speak, the right to think, and the right to act. But embodied in that is that the machinery of the public school will not, push one majority religious viewpoint onto students when they're trying to just make it through public school, which is hard enough. And finally, you have the right to complain about violations. Important to note that if you face this type of religious coercion, you feel uncomfortable, something is happening in your public school that's making you feel religious pressure at the hands of teachers, coaches, administrators, you can report that to FFRF. You can go to our website, ffrf.org/legal/report, and just describe what's happening, who, what, when, where, and you will hear from our legal team. So, Sammi, if you don't have anything to add, I would like to see if we have any questions, because we often get a lot of fact-specific questions from people around this time of year. And it's important to say that everything in this area is very case-by-case, fact-sensitive. So it's important that if something's happening and you don't know whether or not you can complain or whether or not there's anything to be done about it, that you report it to us at our website. Yep. That's ffrf.org/legal/report. You can report a state church violation, describe it there. Whether we can or can't help, we will see it and we will let you know. So, some questions here from Facebook. What do we do if we notice prayers by teachers during school events? Do we talk to them or bring it up with an administrator? So that's a good question. Obviously, we already said you can report it to us. And the number one thing is, and I do think there's power in making a local complaint, being the person who's affected and bringing the complaint yourself. But that being said, it's not always safe to do that, especially when there's a student involved who is, as far as they know, the one and only student on the football team that is complaining or having a problem. They don't want to out themselves as the target of dissent. So, you can definitely, if you're a parent of a student and you feel you can do so without harming or, bringing negative attention to your child, you can definitely speak up and complain. If it's not safe to do that, you can, or even if you do that, you can report it to us for backup or for us to take action instead of you. That can be, that's often what parents and students are looking to us to do, which is complain on their behalf because they can't safely do so. Okay, Sammi. Do you have to be a student or a parent of a student to complain about religion in a public school in your area?
No, definitely not. We receive many complaints about violations in schools that don't come from a student, parent, or employee. They just come from a concerned community member who's aware of the violation and would like us to take action.
Yeah, that's right. Taking a lawsuit raises different requirements in terms of how connected you are to a violation. But of course, a public school district that is crossing the line and violating the rights of its students should be engaged in the process of ending those violations, whether or not they might be sued tomorrow for it or 6 months from now. And of course, oftentimes when we hear about complaints from someone in the community that may not be a parent or a student, and we do complain, then the attention that's drawn to the complaint does bring parents and students that are affected kind of out of the woodwork to note that they're affected and that they are also a complainant of the same issue. All right, here's one. One of my child's teachers wears a Latin cross around her neck during school hours. Is that okay? I think the short answer is yes. There is a balancing between this is really at the essence of the Kennedy case, between the freedom of conscience, free speech, and religion rights of teachers and students, and the Establishment Clause obligations of the public school district. And that includes, of course, teachers acting in their official capacity, which no doubt your child's teacher is in the classroom. But when it comes to garb and personal affects, there would be sort of a balancing of what's reasonably attributed to the school, and certainly under this Supreme Court regime, but even in the past, I think that wearing a personal crucifix would probably be considered protected, the protected speech right of the teacher that doesn't cross over into reasonably attributable to the school district. All right. Are there differences constitutionally between elementary, secondary schools versus collegiate schools as far as what is allowed regarding religion/prayer? Sammi?
The short answer to that is yes. In case law, the courts do definitely draw lines between elementary school, secondary school, so middle, high school, junior high, depending on where you are in the country, and universities. Generally speaking, the younger the students are, the higher the protections. So introducing, religion into a science lesson for, let's say, like third graders, that is a major problem. Like teaching creationism to elementary school students, that's just completely unconstitutional in a public school. Teaching creationism in a high school is unconstitutional too, but maybe having an actual lesson about like the history of Christianity and the history of creationism or something could be okay in a high school depending on the situation. And then at the college level, courts generally view university students as adults who can make up their own mind about things and aren't really under the coercive pressure that kids in K through 12 education are. That's not to say that universities and professors can just do whatever they want and do anything. There are certainly situations that cross the line, but it's a much higher bar when you are at the college level.
Right. I think the key focus in the analysis on this question is, again, coercion. And so the flip side of this question really gets at what I was pointing out earlier about why public schools should be like so jealously protected from religious influence by authority figures, school officials. And that's because the environment is so coercive. And a big part of why that is the impressionability of kids and even adolescents and teens are extremely impressionable. They're extremely vulnerable to all of the social pressures that exist in school, and they're extremely vulnerable to the awesome power differential between themselves and the teachers, coaches, and administrators that completely control their futures. And so things that are really, really coercive in the elementary and secondary school environment might be given a different type of analysis at the collegiate level because, again, like Sammi is pointing out, courts are likely to view, more likely to view college students, people over the age of 18, as less impressionable, more likely to be able to differentiate between what is being endorsed or promoted or pushed on them by the college versus just the kind of marketplace of ideas, the academic freedom and all of those things that are embodied in the college experience, even when you're at a public university. So here is one more question that is a little bit different, but it definitely touches on something that we hear about, so I'm going to put it out there, Sammi. Our elementary school is next to a Lutheran church, and on Sundays, many people use the school's parking lot when they go to church. Is this a violation of church-state separation? I don't know if the school receives any type of rental payment from the church, but I doubt it. That's a really good question that's a little bit different from what we typically hear about, but we do typically receive reports of churches straight up using public school facilities for worship services as a very common practice for churches that themselves don't have a physical location yet, or, they're a church plant that is trying to raise money for a sanctuary. And so in the meantime, they're having worship services in public schools. People report that all the time as like, hey, is this constitutional? And I think the viewer's take on this is right, what you're zeroing in on, which is it kind of hinges on whether or not the school is giving this access to the church in a special preferential relationship, or if it is pursuant to a rental policy that the public is aware of and can avail itself of. So in other words, are school facilities in general open for use by the public on the same terms? And I guess that would extend to the parking lot as well, although it's probably just people doing it without permission. And if you wanted to rabble rouse, you could probably get some enforcement on it. But it would be, in general, if school facilities are being used for church, whether or not they're paying rent, or sometimes school districts don't charge rent, but they certainly do need to go through the process of facility use policy that is established by the school district that's open to the community. Yeah. And then just a reminder that any of these questions you can always report to our legal team at ffrf.org/legal/report on our website. There's a form. You fill it out. And you can run any of this by us, whether it's a violation or not. We can often give it a quick once over and get back to you. And then again, if you're interested in learning about what a prayer walk is, if you see this in your community or you just see it on Facebook or something, you can check out ffrf.us/walks. You can look at our little brochure. It's going to explain when a prayer walk violates the law. These kind of come in weird shapes and sizes. And so you can check that out and see if what you're looking at involves the public school district and how you can report it to us. Yeah, there's a late question coming in about church services. Technically, this is allowed in schools, but is the church allowed to leave flyers behind within the school? So that's one more component that I didn't mention. And not only is facility use supposed to be done pursuant to a neutral school district policy for facility use, but that policy should also include rules about how the property needs to be left. Usually, right, you're not allowed to rent a place and just leave behind all your, odds and ends and your literature and your cross statue and all your doodads. And so if a church is being allowed to store, relics and things on school property or being permitted to leave their flyers behind, that probably often is in violation of their facility use policy, and that should be brought to the school district's attention, and it should be stopped because, of course, during school hours when students are in those facilities, they are then basically being recruited and papered by churches and ministries, which is inappropriate. So that was the last question. Thank you so much, Sammi. Hope everyone's ready to go back to school. That concludes Ask an Atheist for this week. Thank you for joining us. You can join us next week right here for another show. This Sunday on Free Thought Matters, Dan and Annie Laurie speak to science rapper Baba Brinkman and sample some of the music from his latest work. Here is a preview.
It's the modern troubadour genre. Like if Chaucer or Shakespeare were born in the world today, I think they would choose the medium of rap because it's so potent, so immediate, so good at engaging a crowd, so good with the wordplay. So my intro to it was really as a poetry nerd. I love the poetry of rap. I was doing a rap version of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales on tour in the UK in 2007 and 8. And a scientist saw that show, and then he reached out to me. His name was Dr. Mark Palin. He was at the University of Birmingham at the time, and he said, you can do Chaucer, can you do Darwin? How about the origin of species as a rap? And I just love that idea.
And check out Free Thought Radio, FFRF's weekly radio show and podcast. This week, Dan Barker and Annie Laurie Gaylor speak to R. Scott Akamoto, author of the new book, Asian American Apostate. To find out where to hear Free Thought Radio, visit ffrf.org/radio. And if you want more state-church separation talk from the perspective of women attorneys like myself, check out the We Dissent podcast. Our latest episode, we talked with Liz Reiner-Platt. She's the director of Law, Rights, and Religion at Columbia Law School. We discussed how to reframe religious liberty and make religious exemptions work for progressive causes. Find us wherever you get your podcasts and check us out on Facebook and Twitter or at we-dissent.org. If you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. See you next time on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.